Good afternoon. It's Erev Shabbos, Parshas Behar and Bechukosai. This video is a little bit off because somehow or other the camera is not working as well. So I'll try my best. Last week was the Yortzeit of the greatest Tana of the period of the Tanoi, the greatest teacher of the period of those who taught the Mishnah. How can I say this? The Talmud quotes it. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay said, I saw the great men, the Bnei Aliyah, and they aren't many, there are few. If they are 1,000, I and my son are among them. If they are 100, I and my son are among them. And then finally gets to if they are 2, it is I and my son. And if there's only 1, it is I. Implying that he was the greatest of all, not just of his generation, but of all those who preceded him and were to come later. Of course, Mashiach is greater than all of us and all of them. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay, they say, had the spark of Moses, and hence the spark of Mashiach. Why do I mention it here? Because there is the famous story of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon, how he got into the cave in which he and his son stayed for 13 years and lived in absolute purity and in a miraculous fashion. They were 3 great teachers, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. Yehuda described the Romans and said how beautiful the actions of the Romans. They built us bridges and highways, streets, paved the streets in order for us to engage in having open markets. They built public bathhouses. They improved the life of all of us, despite the fact that we've had terrible times from them in the past. But you see that they're trying to help us. Rabbi Yossi was silent, and Rabbi Shimon said whatever they did only for themselves. Highways and bridges for tolls. Streets, paved streets in order to have places of entertainment and ill repute. Bathhouses, that was for themselves, for their own pleasure. Whatever they did only for themselves, and therefore we have no reason to honor them. Of course, this is an argument between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi throughout the entire Mishnah, brought in the entire Talmud, whether intent is more important than action. Rabbi Yehuda says action is the most important, hence the actions that are good will have to be honored. Rabbi Shimon said no. The intent is wrong, is evil, therefore the act has to be colored as evil. Among the people of the base, Rabbi Yossi was silent, didn't say an opinion, because sometimes Rabbi Yossi held that action was more important, sometimes he held intent was more important. And the halacha, interestingly, most of the time goes like Rabbi Yossi. But Rabbi Yossi was silent, didn't say a word, and this conversation came to the Romans authorities because there was a Tana, his name was Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, the son of converts, and he repeated the story either at home or to his students. And the discussion eventually got to the authorities. The authorities said, Yehuda, that honored, shall be elevated. Yossi, who was silent, shall be sent to exile. Shimon, who mocked and embarrassed, should be executed. Shimon heard this. He and his son ran to the attic of a synagogue in one of the cities, And after a while, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, the only one who knows where we are is mother. She could be tortured. You never know what's going to happen. Let's go elsewhere. Let's find a place to hide. They found a cave where they could hide, but the cave was barren. God made a miracle. Buxa tree grew there, a carob tree, and a source of water, a fountain, passed through there, and they were able to drink and eat from the carob. And during the entire first 12 years, all they did was study Torah, and when it was necessary, they got up and they did their prayers, but the entire time, all 12 years, all they were doing primarily was the study of Torah. Finally, after 13 years, they left. There's a whole story about the 13th year, not important, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay went and corrected something in the city because he wanted to show his happiness that God saved him. So he did something for the benefit of the community, and he fixed the streets of Tiberias so that priests, Kohanim, could walk without fearing that they were walking over old cemeteries. Because apparently that area was filled with cemeteries, and the Kohanim couldn't walk there, couldn't get to there. Right, Tiberias is right next to the Sea of Galilee, Yam Kinneret. It's a very important place, and by not being able to walk there, this impacted on their lives, on the quality of their lives, and so Rabbi Shimon went ahead and got them the markings as to where the graves were and where they could walk and where they couldn't walk. Then he went into the street. He saw Yehuda ben Gerim was there. And he says, this man is still around. It says, Yahiv Aynay, he looked at him. Venaaseh Gal shel Atzomos became a pile of bones. So the question that everybody asks is, what was the sin of Yehuda ben Gerim? What did he do? He didn't intend for any harm to come to Rabbi Shimon. So why should he be punished? And furthermore, this business of Yahiv Aynay, he put his eyes on him. Venaaseh Gal shel Atzomos has to be understood. If a person has an ability to look and to kill someone, isn't that murder? What difference does it make if I kill with a gun or if I kill with my eyes? The fact that a person has connection to God, and by looking at something he can suggest punishment, still does not speak well of the person doing it. What's the whole idea of Yahiv Aynay? He put his eyes on him. It sounds like an evil eye. And it says wherever the Chachamim put their eyes on, it either created death or poverty. Why would the wise men, the Chachmei HaTorah, look at people in such a way? This is also inconsistent with the teaching of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay, who was compassionate with the Jewish people and tried to find benefit for them and find a way to be melamed schus, to teach good things about them. So let me tell you a little bit about this idea of Yahiv Aynay. He put his eyes on them. The eyes of the tzaddik are pure, just as their ears are pure, their tongues are pure, their mouths are pure, their eyes are pure. They only see things that are holy. When a tzaddik sees something that's inappropriate, he doesn't want to look at it. Doesn't want to see the opposite of God. But a tzaddik sees another Jew, and he sees the potential in the holiness of that Jew. And he looks at that Jew, and he is able to arouse that Jew to go in the proper way. This comes as a direct effect of the gaze of the tzaddik. The gaze of the tzaddik projects and also attracts. The gaze of the tzaddik projects the fear of God unto people, that they should be aware that there is a God. And the eyes of the tzaddik, the gaze of the tzaddik also attracts the soul, that the soul wants to be close to the tzaddik. I'm almost 72 years old. What I'm about to tell you, most of you will poo-poo. And maybe I'm allowed to say it, maybe I'm not allowed to say it. But since the next generation must hear this and must know this, I've said this only to individuals, but I have experienced the eyes of a tzaddik. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's gaze shook my soul at its very core, its very foundation, at a time when I needed to be shaken up. And at that moment, when I felt this incredible power, almost like electricity, shock from the gaze of the tzaddik, I turned and I saw the Rebbe's eyes looking at me, almost like burning. And the Rebbe squinted, and I felt my soul being drawn back into my body, where I had defects. I don't want to talk about what they were. And the Rebbe was drawing my soul back into my body so it should not be defective. The soul should enter all the facets of the body. And I felt my soul being restored in the body. And there are images in the Kabbalistic works of triangular relationships. And I felt those relationships. I wasn't looking for this. I'm not an imagination. I'm not a person who fantasizes. But his eyes did that. Shook me up to the very core, and the part of my body, that my soul, that is above my body, and drew my soul from that which is transcendent above my body back into my soul, into my body. Tzaddik draws the soul through his eyes like iron to a magnet. So it isn't, God forbid, that the tzaddik wants to injure someone. The tzaddik looks at a person and tries to draw the person to holiness. If that person resists or is resistant or has a negativity that does not allow the soul to be corrected and to be brought back into that body, then the soul is drawn to the eyes of the tzaddik and the person dies. Not because the tzaddik wanted that person to die, God forbid. The tzaddik wanted to correct the soul, to restore the soul in that body. But when that was impossible, why was that impossible? Because that particular individual had humiliated or had negative ideas and negative feelings against the tzaddik. So the tzaddik was not able to restore the person because that person refused to have a connection or to be assisted by that tzaddik. Or that person had done something against the tzaddik, and therefore the tzaddik was not able to spiritually restore that to the person because the person didn't have the merit that that tzaddik should be able to restore and reconstruct him. And that's the secret of Yehuda ben Gerim. Yehuda ben Gerim was upset with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay because he was from converts. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay said that the Romans have no good thoughts. Their motives are evil, and therefore we shouldn't honor them. Yehuda ben Gerim apparently was from converts. Most of the converts of that period were from the Romans, so I'm assuming that he was from the Romans. Also, Rabbi Shimon had initially said, Tov shebegoyim harog. The best of the Gentiles hate us and want to kill us. So again, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim misinterpreted the words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay as saying it was impossible for there to be good among the Gentiles. If that's the case, then how could he be a convert? How could his parents have converted? He misunderstood the words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochay did not denigrate the convert. The convert, it says, Gershon is Gayer, a convert who has converted because they already have a holy soul. It is those who reject, those who oppose, those who harm, those who attack, those that kill. Those are the ones that he's talking about, not the ones who embrace the Torah, embrace Yiddishkeit. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim had a negative feeling and felt that Rabbi Shimon had erred and Rabbi Shimon was wrong in his approach, and that was why he publicized that among his students. And then he was in the city. When you know that your conversation caused the pain of such a great man, why didn't Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim go and ask forgiveness? The reason is because he was angry with Rabbi Shimon. He didn't care that Rabbi Shimon would have been arrested or, God forbid, punished because he was so upset with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's opinion about Goyim, especially the Romans. So Rabbi Shimon looked at him knowing that he needed a tikkun, a correction, for causing him so much pain, and tried to correct him. The reason why he wasn't successful, was because Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim closed himself toward the effect of Rabbi Shimon. He was angry with him, and he wasn't ready to ask forgiveness, despite having caused him pain. And he was perhaps a little happy that he had to run away. And because of all those things, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, as great as he was, had something that was of a very negative nature, that he had opposed and caused harm to a tzaddik, to a Talmid Chacham, and he didn't ask for forgiveness, and therefore could not have been forgiven by Rabbi Shimon. So what happened was, Rabbi Shimon, who was looking at him to try to correct him, the gaze of his eyes caused the soul of Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim to be attracted to Rabbi Shimon, just as the soul of a wicked person is attracted to the eyes of a tzaddik. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim died, despite the efforts of Rabbi Shimon to the contrary.